I'll give you a quick rundown on how you can use Juicebox to make your project successful. And along the way, I'll teach you what Juicebox is, how it works, and why you should actually consider running your project on Juicebox if you haven't already. Juicebox is a way for you to fund, operate, and scale your project on the Ethereum blockchain. And when I say your project, that could be a business or a charitable cause, but that can also be a DAO, a crowdfunding campaign, or just about anything else, because Juicebox gives you a very flexible set of tools for managing just about any kind of community and their finances over time. The platform, was launched in June of 2021, and I'm recording this video in November of 2023. So in that roughly 2-year period, we've seen 1,235 projects launched on the platform, and those projects have raised over $178 million across close to 60,000 payments. And some of those projects have done particularly impressive things. So one example I'd like to point to is Assange DAO. This is a project which was doing a crowdfunding campaign, and they were raising funds for Julian Assange's legal defense. And they were able to raise over $50 million in, I want to say something like 3 days or maybe a week, this very short period of time. It was very impressive. Another cool example is Juicebox DAO. So Juicebox DAO is actually the group which builds and maintains Juicebox and the ecosystem around it. And Juicebox DAO itself runs on the platform. So it's the first project on the platform. And what's cool about it is that all of the bookkeeping and payouts and payroll and revenue management and token, all of that stuff happens on Juicebox. So it's kind of a proof of concept that you're able to coordinate a decent number of people and manage some pretty complex tasks using this platform. One last project I'd like to point to is MoonDAO. MoonDAO is a project which raised funds to send someone into outer space, and they were successful at that. So they sent someone into outer space. They got a contract with Blue Origin, And since then, they've been working on decentralized and open access space research, which has been pretty incredible to watch, as well as some other cool stuff. By the way, that link at the top is a link to our website where you can see some of the other projects which have used Juicebox. So if you go to juicebox.money/project, you'll see all sorts of interesting things people have been working on. A few more things to note about Juicebox before we move on. One is that it's community owned. So Juicebox, as I mentioned earlier, is operated by a DAO. So there's no company, there's no CEO, there's no board of directors. It's a decentralized autonomous organization. And you can almost think of it like a digital co-op where people participate, and every couple of weeks people will vote on where they think the community should go. And then, people vote on that stuff, and the community does that. And what's cool is that Juicebox is actually owned by contributors, people who are making projects, people who are supporting the community in other ways. So it really is kind of this like community-owned platform. The second thing to know about Juicebox is that it's permissionless. So you don't need anyone's permission to make a project. Anyone can make a project and do whatever they want with it. And even if Juicebox DAO, for example, does not like your project, there's no way for them to shut your project down or take your funds away or change your project's rules without your permission. So you really do own your project and the funds within it. And the third thing to note about Juicebox is that it runs on the Ethereum blockchain. So it's not like we have some back-end service somewhere that's calculating everyone's balances and stuff like that. It's actually running as a collection of smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain. Now, those of you who are already familiar with Ethereum can skip forward to the next chapter, but for those of you who aren't or need a little refresher, I'll go over some of the basics and what I mean by smart contracts. So the first thing to know about the Ethereum blockchain is that it's kind of like any other blockchain, right? Like Bitcoin, for example, is a very famous blockchain where you can send Bitcoin and receive Bitcoin. So Ethereum does something similar where you can send this token called Ether or ETH. So you can send and receive ETH. But one thing that makes it different from a lot of other blockchains is that you can also create these things called smart contracts. So smart contracts are basically computer programs that you upload to the blockchain, and they actually will keep running on the blockchain as long as the blockchain continues to exist. So those smart contracts can, process text, do anything a normal computer program can. They can send and receive ETH. They can create their own tokens. They can do all sorts of stuff. So you have those smart contracts, and that's actually how the Juicebox protocol works. The Juicebox platform is kind of built on top of a collection of these smart contracts. which you can read about more on our online documentation. The third thing to note is that although the Ethereum blockchain is decentralized to kind of, I guess, pay people for keeping the blockchain running, whenever you interact with the blockchain, you have to pay a gas fee. And that's paid in Ether. Usually it's pretty small, but it's something worth knowing, right? So if you want to interact with the Juicebox protocol, because you're interacting with those smart contracts, you have to pay a gas fee. And to do that, you'll need a wallet. So wallets are, this computer program. It's kind of like a browser extension, and it holds funds, which is why you call it a wallet. But also you use it for interacting with smart contracts and things like that. So some resources I recommend taking a look at. The first is ethereum.org, where you can learn more about Ethereum and how it works. Next is metamask.io. There you can get a free wallet. And the last one is coinbase.com. There you can get some Ether or other cryptocurrencies. And you can also get those cryptocurrencies in MetaMask if you have just like a credit card or your bank account or something like that. So now let's get back to how Juicebox works. As I said earlier, anyone can make a project, and anyone can pay one of those projects with ETH. So you pay ETH into one of the projects, and in return, whoever pays the project with ETH will get some of that project's tokens. So these are like custom tokens. Each project has its own unique token. And the kind of name of the game with managing a Juicebox project is you can set up rules which dictate how those things evolve over time, right? So when someone pays a project with ETH, how many tokens do they get? Do some tokens go somewhere else? So if you want to, you can actually reserve some tokens for your team or like your community or something like that. You can also take some of that ETH and pay it out to like your staff or, whoever you want. So those rules are set in place. But the thing is, if those rules were set in place forever, it would be hard to keep up with your evolving community and kind of what your needs are. So you can actually set those rules in place for a predetermined length of time called a cycle. So you can say, okay, for the next 20 days, here's the rules. After 20 days, we'll update those rules to something else. So a cycle is kind of just like a set of rules. So to go into this a little bit more, we'll actually go through the process of creating a project right now, and I'll give you some kind of tips and best practices. So you can do this on juicebox.money/create. I have the juicebox.money website pulled up. If you just click create a project, it'll take you there. But because I don't want to spend real ETH, which is like real money, on setting up a project right now, I'll actually go to gorley.juicebox.money, which is like the testing version of Juicebox. So let me actually get a text file pulled up here. Okay, so I have a description up here, and I want to make this project called Dog GPT. I want to make AI-enabled hot dogs. So we're going to get our tagline. So this first tab here is our project's details. These are kind of cosmetic details about our project. So things like its name, its tagline. We have a description, so I'll add that description here. We can also upload a logo for our project. So I already have one ready to go. We can set up some links. So maybe we link to our project's website, like doggpt.com, or maybe it's a .ai. We have our Twitter handle. These are all just things I'm coming up with. Don't actually go to any of these. And if you don't have one, like maybe you don't have a Telegram, you just leave it blank. It'll be left out. That's totally fine. So quick side note, when you create a Juicebox project, what'll happen is the Juicebox project is an NFT, and that NFT will be sent to your wallet. So as long as you have that NFT, you're the owner of the project and you can do whatever you want with it. But if you send that NFT to someone else, now they're the owner of the project. This option right here lets you, from the get-go, make someone else the owner of your project. So if you want to have your friend be the owner of the project from day one, you can do that. I don't want to do that, so I'll leave it blank, but you might want to use that for something. You can also set up some project tags. These are just like for sorting and stuff. So maybe we say, we're a business, we make software, we're pretty socially active. So we'll put a social tag there. And then you can also customize your project page in some other ways. So you can put a cover image, I'll put this nice little banner I have, and you can also add a payment notice. This is like a little warning that's shown to people before they pay your project. So that could be a legal notice, that could be piece of advice or something, but I'll just say, warning, this project is hot. And that is everything we need for the details. So we can actually move on to the next tab. Next, we're actually back at the cycles I was describing. So as you go through these pages, I really do recommend reading these little explanations. So I'll read this out loud to you. With unlocked cycles, you can edit your project's rules at any time. So if we need maximum flexibility and we don't care if people trust us or not, we can do unlocked cycles and we can change things pretty rapidly. With locked cycles, you lock your project's rules for a period of time, like 3 days, 2 years, or 14 days, or 3 minutes. I misread that. And locking your rules helps you build trust with your supporters. This choice isn't permanent. You can switch between locked and unlocked cycles in the future. So that is true. You can use unlocked cycles and then, set up a locked cycle. If you have a locked cycle, in the middle of it, you can schedule your next cycle to be unlocked. And the way that works is cycle 1 starts when you create your project. So it's that first 14 days as soon as we create our project. That starts as soon as we create our project. With locked cycles, if you edit your project's rules during the cycle, those edits will be queued for the next cycle instead of going into effect. In other words, instead of taking effect immediately, those edits will take effect when the next cycle starts. If you need more flexibility, you can switch to unlocked cycles. So let's say we use 14-day cycles. If 6 days in, we're like, oh, I want to change something about my project, and we come back here and we try to change something, what'll happen is those edits won't go into effect. It'll take us until the start of that next 14-day cycle for those changes to go into effect. The cycles will also dictate the kind of pace of your payouts, because payouts happen once per cycle. So for us, since we're doing like a kind of software business, let's say we want to do a payroll style thing. Every 2 weeks, we want to give out payroll. So we'll just use a 14-day cycle. That works for us. So next, we'll go on to those payouts. Payouts let you pay out ETH from your project to any Ethereum wallet or Juicebox project. ETH, which isn't paid out, will be available for token redemptions. We'll get back to that in a second. So you can actually disable that. You don't need to have token redemptions on. But if you have them enabled, people who have your project's tokens can redeem them to get back some of the ETH from your project. So ETH, which isn't paid out, can be available for token redemptions, or if it's not redeemed, it'll be available for use in future cycles. Payouts reset each cycle. So let's say you raise 100 ETH, you're paying out 10 ETH a cycle. If you pay out 10 ETH in the first cycle, you'll still have that remaining 90 ETH next cycle. So by default, there's no payouts. None of the project's ETH can be paid out. All ETH will stay within the project for token redemptions or use in future cycles. If we want, we can switch over to limited payouts. So this means that we're going to set up a fixed amount of ETH to pay out to people. So we click, add a recipient, and we can put in their address right here. I'll just use my own address. And let's say we're going to pay me 1 ETH. Now, that might make sense, but we're a software business, and our developers probably want to get paid in US dollars. So what's cool is we can actually switch to USD and put in 1,000. And what's going to happen is at the time that the payouts are taking place, the Juicebox protocol will look at the price of ETH and it'll say, okay, 0.4 ETH is worth $1,000. So we'll send Philip 0.4 ETH. So it calculates that for you. So we'll add that payout, and maybe we add another payout to a Juicebox project. So we'll send a payout to Juicebox DAO, which is project number 1. And when we do pay the project, it's going to mint Juicebox DAO's tokens. So we'll send those tokens to me. And maybe we're paying Juicebox DAO 500 USD. Now, one thing you might notice is that there are fees down here. So this is actually how Juicebox DAO is able to run, is it's funded through fees. And the way those fees work is when you're sending a payout to a wallet address, there's a 2.5% fee on that. So you'll notice I have a $1,000 payout. There's a $25 or 2.5% fee. There are no fees on payouts to other Juicebox projects. So this $500 going to Juicebox DAO, no fees on that. Fees only take place when funds are leaving the ecosystem, basically. Now, one other thing you might want to look at is unlimited payouts. And the way those work is you'll pay out all of the funds in the project. No matter how much ETH comes in, all of it will come out. and you just set up percentages. So let's say you want to pay out all of the ETH and you want to get 50% of it and you want your friend to get 50% of it. You would use unlimited payouts for that. So once we're happy with this, we can move on to tokens. So when people pay your project, as you know, they receive its tokens. And these tokens can be used for governance, community access, redemptions, and you can also reserve some of the tokens for the recipients of your choosing, which we'll get to in a second. The basic token rules are actually pretty good, but just because I want to go over how all of the mechanisms work, we'll go for some custom token rules. The first option we have here is this issuance rate. So that is the number of tokens which are created when someone pays the project 1 ETH. So let's say we go with 1,000. Now what's going to happen is when someone pays the project 1 ETH, it's going to create 1,000 tokens. And by default, they're going to get all 1,000 of those tokens. But let's say we want to get some of those tokens to, reward our team members who are making valuable contributions to our hot dog ecosystem. We can put a reserved rate, let's say of 20%. Now what's going to happen is we're going to set aside a percentage of token issuance for the wallets and Juicebox projects of our choosing. So we still have 1,000 tokens being created, but when someone pays the project 1 ETH, they're only going to receive 800 tokens, and then the other 200 tokens are going to go to the recipients we picked down here. So we can add a recipient. Let's say I'm the recipient, and I'm getting half of the reserve tokens. We can also add, maybe Juicebox DAO as a recipient, give them the other half of the reserve tokens. So now what's going to happen, someone will pay the project 1 ETH, they get 800 tokens, and then the remaining 200 go to this reserved list. So I get 100 tokens, Juicebox DAO gets 100 tokens. Pretty cool. Next thing to look at is the issuance reduction rate. So if you don't have an issuance reduction rate, what's going to happen is in the first cycle, people will get 1,000 tokens per ETH contributed. Second cycle, same. It'll still be 1,000 tokens per ETH contributed, unless you come in here and manually change that. But the issue with that is people who support your project earlier are taking on more risk. So you probably want to give them more tokens to reward them for taking that risk. And that's what the issuance reduction rate is. So with a 5% issuance reduction rate, what'll happen is in the first cycle, 1,000 tokens will be created for every ETH contributed. But then in the next cycle, so after the first 14 days, that number, 1,000, will decrease by 5%. So the project will only issue 950 tokens per ETH. Then in the cycle after that, the project will issue 902.5 tokens per ETH, and so on and so forth. Now, I will say, this does increase geometrically the price of your token, so it can get very expensive very quickly, and I would recommend being conservative with this. Of course, you can update it in a later cycle, so you can set it at 5% at first, update to 2% or something later on. But what I would recommend is probably just starting out with 0% or maybe a very small issuance reduction rate, unless you really know what you're doing and you want to have a very aggressive kind of incentive for people to pay early on. So that's the thing. You can always use these things creatively, but for us, it probably makes sense to have a lower issuance reduction rate. So maybe we'll do a 1%. Next, we'll look at the redemption rate. I really recommend looking at this explanation. I'm actually going to read it out loud for you. So, supporters can burn their tokens to reclaim some of the ETH not needed for payouts. So if you need 1,000 ETH to cover your payouts, that's always going to be set aside. People can't get that by redeeming their tokens. The amount of ETH they receive depends on the redemption rate. At 100%, redemptions are 1-to-1. Somebody receiving 10% of all project tokens will receive 10% of the available ETH. So that's kind of this chart down here. You can see if someone redeems all of the project tokens, they get all of the ETH. If they redeem half of the tokens, they get half the ETH, and everywhere in between that applies. At 0%, redemptions are turned off. And what that means is no matter how many tokens they redeem, they don't get back any ETH. Anywhere else, redemptions take place along a bonding curve, meaning people who redeem first will get less ETH per token, and people who redeem later will get more ETH per token. So let's take a look at this. So let's use a bonding curve of 5%. So you can see this is pretty extreme, right? You can redeem a good chunk of the kind of number of tokens out there, and you won't get back that much ETH. But then what's happening is that ETH is staying in the project, and that means that people who redeem later on will actually get far more ETH per token. So this encourages people to redeem later rather than earlier, and it's an incentive for people to hold on to your tokens. Now, this is kind of getting too into the weeds, and for most projects, I would say either just keep it at 100, so let people redeem, or turn it off, keep it at 0. But, you know, some projects might want to tune this over time. But for our hot dog AI company, you know what? We might want to keep all the money, so maybe we keep redemptions off. Or you know what? Maybe we keep them all the way on. Either one works. The next thing is owner token minting. These are kind of some options you have at the bottom. This lets you mint however many tokens you want to any address. This obviously looks really bad, and people are less likely to pay your project if you have this on. The only reason you would really want to have that on is if you're like negotiating a private deal, for example, and you need to mint some tokens for them. That might be a justification, but otherwise I would recommend keeping that off. You can also pause token transfers. Now, read this carefully. While transfers are paused, this project's tokens can't be transferred to other addresses. The project's ERC20 tokens, if already issued, are always transferable and will not be affected by this rule. So what does this mean? The project's ERC20 tokens, if already issued. So ERC20 tokens are kind of the basic type of tokens on Ethereum, right? A lot of different tokens are ERC20 tokens. So they work with things like Uniswap and other different platforms. But the downside is that they're actually quite complicated. And this means that there's a pretty big gas fee for interacting with Ethereum tokens. It's not huge, but it's bigger than it could be. So by default, the Juicebox protocol tracks tokens internally, and there's no ERC20 token for a project. But at any time, a project creator can create an ERC20 token for the project. And if they do so, then the project will have both the native tracking and the ERC20 tokens, and people can choose which version that they want to get. So if that's a little bit confusing, you don't need to worry about it too much, but you can also ask us questions at any time. Okay, so once we're done with the token, we move on to our NFTs. So this is a cool thing about Juicebox. You can actually create tokens and NFTs, or you can shut off tokens and just use NFTs. You can shut off NFTs, just use tokens. You can get pretty creative with it. So let's add a custom NFT. I actually don't have an image for it, so we'll just use this banner that we added earlier. And we will name this NFT Hot Dog Landia. Here is the beautiful land of dogs. And the minimum contribution is the minimum amount someone needs to pay to get the NFT. It's kind of like the price. So maybe we make it 0.5 ETH. Another thing we can do is limit the supply. So let's say by default, actually, this is true. By default, as many people can mint this NFT as they want. You know, anyone can come as long as they pay 0.5 ETH, they get the NFT. But let's say we only want 10 of them out there. We can do a limited supply of 10. So now after 10 people mint this, no more will be available. We can also reserve NFTs in the same way that we reserve tokens. So maybe we say for one of every 5 NFTs minted, send an extra one to my address. Cool. We can give them voting weight for governance and that sort of thing. So if you want to set up a governance scheme and you want to use NFTs, you can add voting weight there. You can also link to some website. I'm going to link to doggpt.ai. Amazing. So that's what our NFT looks like. And you can add as many NFTs as you want. So you can even add 30, 50, however many NFTs. And then down here, once you add some NFTs, you can set up some information about your collection. So we can name the collection. I will call it DoggGPT NFT Epic Collection. We can give it a symbol, DNEC, may as well. And you can give it a description. These things will be shown on places like OpenSea and other NFT marketplaces. If you want, you can actually give the NFT on-chain governance properties, but this increases the gas fees actually for interacting with them. So I'll keep it off because I don't plan on using on-chain governance. You should only really use on-chain governance if you really know what you're doing. You can also add a little success pop-up. So we can say, thank you for buying our amazing NFTs. We can put a little label, go to our Discord, and we can link them to DoggGPT. There's a little preview button so we can see what that looks like. They click this, they go to our Discord. A few other options. You can actually use NFTs for redemptions instead of tokens, but you can only use one, either NFTs or redemptions. So most projects will want to leave this off, but if you're really big on the NFTs, you might want to turn it on. Oh, excuse me. You can also prevent NFT overspending. So this NFT costs 0.5 ETH, but if I wanted to, I could pay 0.7 ETH and still get the NFT. Prevent NFT overspending means they can only spend exactly as much as they're getting. So, spend 0.5 ETH, you get one NFT. You can't spend 0.7 ETH. If you spend 1 ETH, you get 2 NFTs. And that is everything with NFTs. So we'll move on. The last step for setting up our project is the edit deadline. So this is something I kind of left out with cycles earlier where, okay, cycles are great, but if I have a 14-day cycle and I make changes at 13 days and 23 hours in, it's still pretty hard for people to verify those changes and have time to kind of react accordingly. So that's why we introduced this edit deadline. So I'll read this description here. Edits to this project must be made before this deadline. This gives token holders time to verify the edits before they take effect. For example, with a 1-day edit deadline, edits must be made at least 1 day before a cycle starts. So with our 14-day cycle, if we have a 1-day deadline, any changes have to be made by day 13. And if you try to make them, midway through the last day, what's going to happen is those changes won't go into effect in the next cycle, but they'll go into effect the following cycle. So since we have a pretty long cycle, 14 days, I think we can actually do the 3-day deadline, and that'll work well for us. We have a few other options down here. You can pause payments to the project. If you have this enabled, nobody can pay your project. In most cases, it's a bad idea to have that on. Probably want to keep it off unless you're shutting down your project. You can also hold fees. So that is for kind of crowdfunding style projects where instead of processing the fees immediately, they're held within the project so that if you return the funds to the project, you can still offer people a full refund. But if you're not doing a crowdfunding style project, that's probably not going to be relevant for you. There are also some contract permissions here. Again, probably not worth worrying about. Click on next, and you can come to this review screen where you see everything that you set up for your project. So here are all the details we set up. Here are our cycles and payouts. Here's some information about our token. Here's the NFT that we set up, and here's some of our other rules. So if this looks good to us, we can say, I have read and accept the terms of service and the risks, and we can deploy our project. So it's going to pop up in our wallet. Ooh, I accidentally clicked off of it. There we go. So we can look over the transaction, confirm it, and now the transaction is pending. So it's kind of waiting to be included on the blockchain, and it looks like it just worked. So we can actually go to our project now pretty fast. So this might take a second to load because it's kind of setting up the project page for the first time. There we go. So now this is the page that people will see. And also there's dark mode if you prefer. But people can come here and they can pay your project in ETH or in USD amounts. So maybe 2 USD worth of ETH, for example. They can buy your NFTs up here. They can add the NFTs to the cart. They can read about your project. They can see information about your cycles, all of that good stuff. You'll also notice this updates tab. So people can actually get email notifications and subscribe to big updates about your project. And if you put out updates, it'll go to all those people who have subscribed. And then if you want to do something like ERC20, like create the ERC20 token, set your project handle, change the project settings in the future, just connect the wallet which owns the project and click Manage Project to go to that menu. So we have done it. The one thing I need to warn you about, though, is that Juicebox is not magic. And it pains me to say this, but it's true. So we see a lot of people come to Juicebox and they'll put all this time and effort into setting up their project, and then they just leave the project there and never touch it again. And by itself, a project is not really going to attract many payments. It happens sometimes, but it's pretty rare. So you'll want to think, one, how you're going to get word out to people, and two, how you're going to make them want to pay your project, even if you get the word out to them. So first, I'm going to give you some context here. There are 276 of the over 1,000 Juicebox project. Only 276 of the projects have raised more than $2,000. But of those 276 projects, The median volume, like the amount of funds they've received, is $24,802. And the average is actually over $6 million. So what I'm trying to suggest with this is that if you're actually able to get your project off the ground and you're able to get over that kind of basic threshold, there's a really good chance that you'll do very, very well. And a lot of Juicebox projects do. So it's worth putting in the effort with, promotion, visibility, that sort of thing to get over that initial hump. And it may seem discouraging at first, but once you do get over that initial hump, there's a very good chance you'll do very well. So, promotion. Twitter is number one when it comes to promoting in crypto, right? Because there are huge audiences of people within the crypto space that are already on Twitter. So you definitely want to be on Twitter. That should kind of be your bread and butter. And you can get a lot of inspiration from existing projects which have used Twitter. You want to convert people from Twitter, like kind of bring them into your Discord server or a Telegram channel maybe to engage with them, as they're hanging around. And you can also have a YouTube page. A lot of projects do that. It works well. Also a good idea to have like a website with some explanation. So a lot of this stuff is kind of up to you, but Twitter is kind of the one non-negotiable. You really want to be on Twitter. Next, you want to think about the incentive. Like, why are people going to pay your project? So one option is because you're actually selling your product on Juicebox. So there are projects like Peel, which is like a team of front-end developers, Planetable, which is like an IPFS blogging service, Nance, which is like a team of people that provides governance, and you actually pay for those projects by paying their Juicebox project. You pay for those products by paying those Juicebox projects. You could also offer people governance rights, right? So people like having governance rights. They like voting on things. So if you give some control to the community, that might be a reason that makes it, worth people's time to pay your project. So you can set up off-chain governance, which is what we recommend at first for most projects on snapshot.org. And if you want to look at on-chain governance, you can do that at tally.xyz. And if you need help or you have questions with, setting this stuff up, feel free to reach out to me. I'll help you out. You can also set up like a private Discord channel, or maybe even a private Telegram using something like guild.xyz. And these are all URLs. You can go to these websites and read more about them. A few other things that we should look at. And one more thing that I forgot to put in the slides is that you can also have like the promise of redemptions and stuff. So if people know that they can get some of their money back, they're probably more likely to pay your project. Okay, a few other things we should go over quickly, kind of a lightning round. One is extensions. So the Juicebox protocol is actually pretty flexible, and you can extend it and write new contracts to add new features to it. So if there's something that you want to do with Juicebox and it doesn't quite fit into the existing mechanisms, reach out to us. There might be a way for you to like work with some smart contract developer or pay for some development to get those new features added just for your project. The second thing is legal. So Juicebox DAO doesn't provide legal advice. Juicebox.money doesn't provide legal advice. You really need to kind of assess your own situation, do your own research, and talk to a legal expert to figure out what needs you have, right? Because every project will be different depending on what they're trying to do, their jurisdiction, all that sort of stuff. So definitely do your own research there. The last thing is ownership. So like I said, Juicebox projects are NFTs, and by default, it's actually minted to whatever wallet that you have connected when you're setting up when you're connected to the website. So if that's just some random MetaMask, people might look at that and go, okay, that's pretty risky. So what you can do is set up something called a multi-sig. That's a wallet where multiple people need to sign off, multi-sig, for any transaction to be approved. And the most popular one is Safe. And you can set up a safe at safe.global. And here's some resources that you might want to take a look at. So juicebox.money is our website. If you have any questions or anything goes wrong, go to discord.gg/juicebox. That's where most Juicebox DAO members hang out, and you can ask questions and talk to people there. And then we also have some documentation online at docs.juicebox.money. Now, juicebox.money is not the only way to interact with the Juicebox protocol. So one new kind of thing that people have been working on is called JuiceCrowd. So if you go to juicecrowd.gg, you can see this here. It's kind of a new version of Juicebox, and it's meant to be, to work very well for crowdfunding projects. And it's actually a curated experience. So I recommend if you have something that's kind of like a crowdfunding style, definitely submit your project. Submissions close on the 8th of November, so a few days after I upload this video, but there's still some time. And if your project gets accepted, you'll get like some direct advice from the people who are running this. They'll help you set your project up. And there are even some prizes for projects who do well. So that's definitely a good option. Another cool thing you might want to take a look at, kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, are RevNets. So this is still in the very like early experimental phase. We have some contracts together, but we're still building this stuff out. So RevNets are kind of a way for you to launch a Juicebox project, but without an owner. So the rules are set in place ahead of time, and everyone knows what they're getting into. And then, the kind of network will play out predictably based on the redemptions and the issuance, but there's some slightly different terminology. So if you want to learn more, if that's kind of an intriguing, this like really hardcore decentralized stuff intrigues you, go to sim.revnet.app. You can click on this about and learn about it, and there's some simulations here. And hopefully we'll have more stuff over time uploaded to the main website, which is revnet.app. So you can see we're kind of building out the interface as we speak. There's also Nance.app, which is pretty cool. That's a team of people who help Juicebox projects kind of set up cool governance stuff. So I really recommend taking a look there. There's some people who will help you out. If you need help with art, join the Juicebox DAO Discord server and ask for WagMe Studios. They do all of the art for Juicebox.money. They're awesome. And if you need art, you can pay them and get some stuff set up. And if you want to get in touch with me, here's my Discord handle, PhilipVV. Here's my Telegram, and here's my email. So feel free to reach out to me on any one of those platforms.